Good day, everyone, especially to our instructor, Mr. Anthony Gamali. Photography has and still continues to serve a wide variety of functions in our criminal justice system. The extent to which photography can be applied in different pillars of our criminal justice system will depend on of the size organizations, its financial capabilities, the enthusiasms, imaginations, and skill of its personnel. Listed are some applications which are subjects of our brief discussions and for practical exercises during laboratory work to build the basic foundations of skill for beginners and of one of who is already in the practice of forensic photography. Num- Number one, identification purposes. A. Prisoners, persons subjects of investigation. B. Unidentified cadavers, victims of crimes, traffic accidents, airline crash, collapse of buildings, shipwrecks, stampede, explosions, natural calamities like earthquakes, landslide, cave-in of mines, tidal waves, and massive floods. C. Missing persons for publications and alert warnings. D. Lost or stolen properties, work art like painting, sculpture, icons, antiques, expensive jewelries, rare coins, or book. E. Civilian. Police clearance for employments, travel abroad, other purposes. Number 2. Recordings and preserving of evidences. A. Crime scenes, homicides or murder, thief or robbery, arsons, other crimes listed in revised penal codes as well as other special laws, organized or syndicated crimes, cyberspace, or computer crime. B. Traffic accidents. C. Object of evidence. Guns, bullets, or shell, knife, clothing, shoes, other personal belongings. D. Evidential traces. Fingerprints, shoe or tire prints, blood stains, and other body fluids, toll marks, bombs, or explosive residues. Number 3. Discovering and proving of evidence not freely seen by the naked eye. A. Contrast control by lighting, use of filters, use of different films and papers. B. Magnifications or enlargements of tiny objects by the applications of micrography or photomacrography. Photomicrography is taking a photograph through a microscope. The camera is attached to the eyepiece, and it is the lens of the microscope that is used in photography. Photomacrography or macro photography is a taking a photograph with short focus lens. It is an extreme close up of small objects to photograph to one or an actual size or slightly bigger. Microphotography is the taking of photograph of an object in a very reduced size or tiny image of large object, for example, microfilm. C. Use of evidence suggestions like X-rays, ultraviolet rays, and infrared rays. Number 4. Recording actions of offenders. A. Surveillance. B. Entrapment. C. Extrajudicial confessions. D. Reenactment of crime. 4. 5. Fourth of exhibits. A. Individual photograph. B. slides, projections, comparison charts, and D. Motion pictures or video coverage presentations. 6. For crime prevention, visual presentations for lectures on traffic educations, modus operandi of con game artists, snatcher or hold upper civil defense, informa- uh, informational services shared with other local or foreign police organizations business, establishment, banks, hotels, and industrial complex security. 7. Public information. Phot- photography, photograph for press releases, poster of wanted criminal. 8. Police training. Prepared training, film, or video presentations of personnel, indoctrinations, tactics, techniques, traffic control, civil disturbances, demonstration, control riots of prison disorders, documentaries for pre and post briefings on police operation. B. Specific applications. Number one, identification photograph. An identification photograph should be an accurate likeness of subjects from which he can be recognized by witnesses or police officers. This photograph should by witnesses or police officers that photograph should strive to reproduce every mole, scar, wrinkles, and others. Number two, crime scene photography. A. General consideration. The primary purpose of crime scene photography is to provide information that will assist the successful investigations and subsequent prosecutions of a crime case. Photography is used as a permanent visual record or exact original locations and conditions of the different aspects of the scene and vital evidences of proof. Hence, the indispensable photographing of crime scene should be done completely and accurate before objects of evidence are removed, altered, or lost. In the initial stages of an investigations, there are certain aspects that are not readily evident, but later they may affect vital issues of the case. GR crime scene photograph serve the following areas. Number one, to prove the investigator and prosecutor with an accurate pictorial presentations of the appearance and positions of objects at the scene. And number two, to aid in questionings of suspect and witnesses when their sworn statement are being taken. 3. To present to the court an accurate pictures of the scene, thereby enabling them to understand the evidences better and evaluate intelligently the testimony concerning the distances of the defendants and witnesses. These are the example. A. The long range of general view. B. The medium range or medium view. C. The close up, and D. The extreme close up. The photographic range or views can be categorized as A. Focusing on the locations of the crime. B. Concentrating on the features of the offense. C. Centering on the result of the crime. D. Featuring the physical evidence existing at the scene. And A. Focusing on the follow-up activities not directly occurring of the immediately seen. The location of photograph should depict the various places which are part of the crime scene. areas. An aerial photograph exterior view of whole buildings including nearly several rooms are some examples. The natures of the crime should be depicted by the photograph, which will assist the investigator in determining the type of crime, differentiating like in revolving whether it is homicide or suicide, or in case which does not readily offer offer obvious answer. The result of crime may have several aspects. For example, in a incident, which began as a house break-in through a kitchen's door, continue with robbery and culminated with the rape when the victims confronted in the intruder. Therefore, the result of each portions of the crime are depicted on sequential fashions to reproduce the events of great relevance is the photographing of the physical evidences and their relationship with other evidences to establishing their connections to the accused. The follow-up photograph represents an outgrowth of crime investigations. Photograph of the autopsy, voices or wounds on live victims or suspects are some example. This additional photograph will reveal a greater depth of understanding of the activities of crime scene. B. Perspective camera position. Since crime scene photographs are designed to represent to a viewer of the areas as would have met the eye of an average observer, the procedure for taking the photograph is straightforward. It must have a good perspective or simply fly stated. The size and distances of objects in photograph must convey a normal. C. Lens. Two lenses are usually sufficient at crime scene. A wide angle lens and a normal lens. Very seldom that the telephoto lens is needed. A macro zoom lens is the most ideal for crime scene work. D. Lighting. Usually exists in room height lights, daylights, and artificial lights may be satisfactory for taking photograph of crime scenes. However, because of wide variety lighting conditions in different areas of a room, there is a need to supplemental or additional lights, while the use of photo flood lamp to add illuminations to a room or a scene in sometimes cords can get along the field of view camera can impede free movements within the scene, and setting it up it often consuming for uh for and speed the use of illumination from one plus unit is necessary. A. Markers in the field of view. Because of the objects of some lawyers and the court to markings devices appearing in a photograph of crime scenes, it is therefore wise or prudent to take photograph without it and one with the legally accepted markers or marking devices, and devices are the following. Number one, ruler or measuring device. Rulers, yardstick, or tape measures can be show relative size and distances between objects. It can also show the degree of magnifications or reduction of the final prints. These rulers must be placed beside the subject. In the case of fingerprints or handwritings, they are usually placed in a base to maintain uniformity of locations in photograph that will be used to comparison chart. Number two, identification data. A small sign is usually placed at the scene, but it is data should be limited to the date, the time, location, and case or job number. Number three, location markers. This can be stick or numbered sign to show specific locations of small objects that readily seen in an overall photograph. In selecting markers, avoid using an article with resemble an objects that is originally found in the scene. F. Photograph log. When responding to a case, a record of the data regarding for circumstances, surroundings, or related to the pictures taken of the crime scene must be noted for instant recollections. Usually, this information is written on a notebook or transferred to the original request form, where the negative will eventually be before entering the file. This will facilitate the search and retrieval of the negatives when need for recopy or for court representations. This will likewise wise establish the chain of positions of original negatives and photographs printed. Here are some of information needed. C. Specific crime. Here are some suggestions of what photographs to take on the following common crimes. Again, we remind you that guidelines on the subject is the nature of the offense and elements of the crime. Number one, homicide or murder. Since the investigations of death has a wide variety of forms, photograph should provide information concerning the manners and cause of death of the victims. This set of photographs should help the investigations in reconstruction of crimes and in verifying statements of suspects witnesses. Cause of deaths. A. Crime involving firearms. In case where firearms was caused in the commission of a crime, the work of photographer is more difficult and complex. The taking or photograph must be consultations and advice of a forensic ballisticians and medio legal officer. Hanging. Indeed, apparently due to hanging, thou sometimes exists whether the occurrence is homicides, suicides, or accidental. The original positions of the body is of prime importance. Naturally, the necessity of administering first aid measure offers result the complete change in the original positions if the body was found undisturbed. The photograph that will help determine the of manner of death is in an overall views of body and the rope taken on torso and foot level. Drowning. In drowning case, the body is usually the objects of interest since the crime scene itself is uncertain except the locations of where the body was found floating or snagged. Electrocution. In case of death by electrocutions, the usual photographs are taken in the area of sense, particularly the cause of current flow, or from electrical connections where the shock could have originated like exposed wires. cracks in solution presence of water near or surroundings, the body, the accessibility of mental features to the disease, originally positions of uh, of the shock. E. Explosions. In cases of explosions, take photographs that will help determine whether the explosions is directed against property, against persons, or both. To be considered in selecting objects that should be photographed are the following. A. Natures of the explosive device. Homemade, dynamite, liquid chemical, bomb, or other military hardware or stuff. Strewn about the military about the scene are parts of pieces and fragments of the containers, fuse, tapes, wire, clothes, papers, metal parts that are embedded on wool or objects at the scene. B. Undetonated part of the explosive. They may be found of distances from points of explosions. C. Traces of liquid explosives, stains or clothing, stains or wools, particles of wax or paraffin, or spillage at the purchase of the scene. D. Point of origin. The exact spot where the things is placed and probably open windows or door where it was thrown. A. Conditions of the household items. These may be objects which will show whether the explosions was due to faulty gas line, gas leaks from the gas valve, ruptured pipes, or fittings. Photograph should also show the degree of destructions and how wide was the area that was affected. 2. Robbery case. A general view of exterior of the buildings. B. Points of breaks on entry. Marks of force should be shown clearly with both medium view and close ups. C. Points of exit. D. Conditions of the room. Be aware of characteristic pattern which will indicate modus operandi. A. Places where valuable materials were removed. F. Articles left behind like burglary tools, crowbars, mental saw, mental file, screwdrivers. J. G. Trace evidences like fiber adhering on window frames, soils, cigarette butts, burns, matches, powders, tool marks, shoe or footprints, fingerprints with which includes the places where they are found or developed. Six offenses. In the crime of rape, the photographs to be taken are place of incident, signs of struggle or resistance on the part of the victims, and objects of evidence. 4. Arson on fire. The difficulty of proving arson, the willful of the malicious burning of property is so great that every technical aid must be brought to the photographing of an arson case is sometimes long, extending for a period of several days. It should begin as soon as possible, usually pictures of the fire in progress, and continue throughout the search for evidence after the fire. The photograph to be taken during the progress of fire are the following. A. Area of origins. B. PD. Directions and manners of spread of the fire. C. The nature of burning substance as indicated by the color of smokes and color size of the flame. D. The progressive stages of burning are shown from various angles and significant changes taking place. A. Uh, unusual arrangement of doors and windows. F. Entity of spectators that arsonist usually returns to the scene to witness the burning. D. Surveillance photography. The purpose of surveillance photography is to gather pertinent facts or information or evidence of illegal acts of person or if a place is being used for illegal activities. While still photograph can be used to identify a person or a place, motions, pictures, or videography should be used to record an activity. With still photography, there is always that chance that a moment of pictures taking, the subjects may bend down or turn to another directions or another person. Vehicles or another objects may obstruct the view, but motions, pictures, or video will avoid the possibility because of large number of frames to choose from. Suggested equipment and materials. Number one, miniature camera with motor drive or automatic film. Number two, uh, telephoto lens with 400 mm or higher or 100 to 400 mm zoom lens with tele extender two times or four times. Three, a right angle lens attachment. Number four, a night viewing device with attachments to a 35 mm camera. Number five, film with ISO 400 to 27 degree or higher. 6. Infrared flash unit. 8. Miniature video camera with following specification. 8. Video camcorder for 8 mm or 16 mm cassette tape or video digital camera for megapixel or higher. B. Power power source 12 VDC. C. Power output 9W. And D. Lens 10.1 zoom f1.4 or f1.2 10.5 mm and 105 mm. Auto manual zoom macro. A. Minimum lights 30 lux. F. Optimum lights 150 lux. G. Auto manual focus. H. Playback still fast forwards rewinds. I. High speed shutter. G. Slow motion. And K. Power standby. L. Color balance. And M. Remote control. And N. Time and date indicator. A. Fingerprints photography. Fingerprint is one of the most convincing means of establishing the facts that the suspect was present at the crime scene. Without photography, such evidence would lose some of its effectiveness since fingerprints are found on fixed objects and cannot be brought to the laboratory or later court, while uh, other are barely visible to the naked eye. This and other Difficulties are readily overcome by photographing. Fingerprints are easily destroyed by careless handling or exposure to weather, so it must be recorded and preserved photographically. Fingerprint is a record of the pattern of frictions range of the skin of the finger. Fingerprints left accidentally at scene of a crime or those expressive on card of an individual are photographed to serve the following purpose. Number one, makes permanent record of fingerprints. And number two, will bring out thin fingerprints which cannot be studied by the naked eye but often are of great value for identification purposes. And three, it can magnify a fingerprint to almost any extent desired. Number four, will make possible the side by side comparison of magnified fingerprint for the court to see whether or not two or more fingerprints are identical in details. Whether chance expressions or letters of visible, there's photographing is a task calling for technical skill and knowledge. An accidental expressions is rarely as a perfect as a prepared impressions with links by a skilled fingerprints technician. Very often these are some parts fragmentary or some parts smudged. A. Type of fingerprint. Since the photographing of fingerprint is to help the fingerprint expert to be able to study, analyze, and compare fingerprints, in any types of fingerprints it must be taken at 1 is to 1 actual size and obtain good definitions and proper contrast. Number 1, plain or black fingerprints on black or dark background. And number 2, white fingerprints on black or dark background. Number 3, black fingerprints on colored background. 4, black fingerprints on multicolored background. Number 5, fingerprints on glass, plastic materials, or uh, polished metal. Number 6, fingerprints on paper. Number 7, fingerprints on mirror. F. Questions, documents, photography. In no other types of forensic examinations is photography used so extensively is explaining points of proof to court than in questions, documents, examinations. In this photographic work, the photographer should be under the guidance and supervisions of documents examiner so that uh, the photographic objects is clearly defined. The contrast balance and total reproductions that is required to clearly show and record the paper and writings to line quality, paint pressure, and their darkened edges is so critical and demanding every day. Every documents, uh, every knowledge and technical skill of photographer. Some documents require exceedingly high or abnormal contrast to bring out what does not respond to ordinary progress. So again, the photographer must be innovative. A. General use of photography is in questions documents examination. Number one, documents submitted to examination should be photographed immediately for record purposes. A good photographic copy of the documents can be used for case study, thereby freeing the possible soiling or mutilations of the original documents. Moreover, when two or more examiners have to examine the same documents for a collegial expert opinion, it can easily to be replicated so every examiner can examine the documents at the same time without bothering one another. Number two, magnification. Handwriting and typewriting or writings are both too small in their original size to study and determine whether it is genuine or forgery, so they have to be enlarged. Three, side by side comparison. Many people cannot see points of identity of difference until objects that are compared are placed side by side. Photograph can be cut apart of the portions to be compared or placed side by side. Areas of photographic concern. Number one, handwritings. A. Forms of handwritings. B. Line quality. C. Patching. D. Sequence of cross lines. And E. Writing overfold. F. Differentiations of inks or pencils. 2. Type writings. A. Type design. B. Alignment. C. Slant. D. Evenness of impression. E. Defective characters. F. Substitution. G. Identity of operator. And 3. Papers. A. Erasures. Number 1. Mechanical sidelight photography. And 2. Chemical ultraviolet or infrared photography. J. Ultraviolet photography. Ultraviolet photography is taking of photograph using ultraviolet rays or more specifically radiations having a wavelength of 30 to 400 nanometers of the electromagnetic spectrum. The operating principle of ultraviolet photography lies in that some materials will absorb ultraviolet rays while others reflects these radiations. Some others have partial absorption, some partial reflections. This difference in reactions can be recorded photographically when materials are illuminated with these radiations. Number one, methods of ultraviolet photography. A. Reflected methods. This method is accomplished by the following steps. Number one, illuminate the subjects with an ultraviolet lamp or a light source emitting ultraviolet rays, radiations. Number two, excludes all visible lights in exposing energy. This is accomplished by the placing a Rattern filter No 18E over the lens of camera. And three, record the image in camera using almost any type of film. B. Fluorescence method. There are certain materials that will fluoresce when subjected to ultraviolet rays. Very often, this is in the visible light spectrum. This fluorescence since effects or reactions is recorded photographically in following procedure. Number one, set up the camera on tripod or production stand inside the dark room. Almost any type of a film can be used with this method. Number two, an appropriate ultraviolet lamp is used to illuminate the subjects so it will fluoresce. 3. Please Ratten filter number 2B, ultraviolet absorbing filter over the lens of the camera. Number 4. Mix the exposure since the emulsion speed of the film and the intensity of light source are not ideally determined test or trial exposure are made as reference for the ideal exposure setting. As stated earlier, this is undertaken inside a dark room to solve the problem in difficult of focusing. Pre-focus the lens of the camera under ordinary room. Lights or any ordinary lamps. Stop down the lens, the diaphragm, then put off the visible lights before making the actual exposure. C. Light source. There are many light sources that emits ultraviolet radiations, but not all of them are suitable for forensic photography. Listed are some common and suitable light sources. A. Sunlight. B. Electronic flash unit. C. Mercury vapor lamps. D. Carbon arc lamps. A. Fluorescent lamp. F. Ultraviolet lamp, popularly known as a black lamp, used by Bank Taylor in ideal radiation source, and it is readily available in the market. The, ex- the exposed film is proceed in the same chemical solutions with the same processing time. And D. Fluorescent applications. The applications wide and varied, but here is a short list. A. Fingerprints on multicolored background. B. Questions, documents, examinations, particularly on chemical erasures, disappearing of erase writings or figure. C. Detection or presence of semen covered with blood on clothing or undergarment in alleged rape case. D. Examinations of precious or semi-precious stones in case of stand. E. Presence of fluorescence powder in the hands of suspect in cases of entrapment of extortion. H. Infrared photography. Infrared photography is taking of photographs with radiations between 700 to 1000 nanometers of the electromagnetic spectrum. The difference between ordinary photography to that infrared lies in type of film, use the kind of filter used in and in focusing method. Number one, film use. Infrared film. Infrared film may be black and white colors, reversal type. Number two, filter use. Rotten filter number 87 or any deep with filter for B and W and Rotten no 12 for color works. And three, focusing method. Focus the lens of the camera under visible lights. Once focused, readjust the focus slightly to conform with the longer wavelength of the exposing energy. To simplify this procedure, most 35 mm SLR camera lens have a red dot or short line in focusing scale where these added adjustments should be set. And note, when this adjustment is done, the image of the subjects on the ground glass or viewfinder will appear slightly blurred. A. Light sources. Number one, sunlight. Number two, electronic flash unit. Three, photo flood lamp. And four, carbon arc lamp. These are the two types of infrared photography, the reflected methods and luminescence lucine methods. Number one, Infrared reflected methods. Load the camera with the infrared film. Attach the filter of the camera lens. Illuminate the subjects with the appropriate light source. Then focus the lens of the camera as described earlier. Then take your pictures. Since infrareds will do not have L motions, speed indicator, test, or child exposure, it's also advised to get the best exposure settings. The use of small opening like f8 or f11 is however advised. And number two, infrared luminescent method. Some materials, when illuminated with visible lights, especially the blue-green region, but is devoid of infrared radiations of luminescence. Many dyes and pigments like ballpoints, pen inks react this way to record this phenomenon. The photography is also done inside the darkroom. The film and filter used to reflected method should also be used, but the additional focusing suggests is no longer necessary to determine the ideal exposure setting. Brackets that settings widely apart. And forensic applications. Number one, chemical erasures in questions documents examination. Two, obliterated writings. Three, charred or burnt documents. Four, presence of gunpowder on skin or clothing of a victim that is covered with dried blood. Number five, blackout photography or the taking of photograph in total darkness.